Tingala, que ce soit Tôt ou Tabaza, Luanda, South Africa, Abidjan, Yaoundé, Libreville, Paris ou même Jamena. Si Koyo, Kanati, Kelly, Iyo, Papa.
Moninga nanga yo, tika kosalanga bongo.
We have, on top of the Congo, a leadership that is not taking care of the national interests of Congo, the way we learn here in the US. So in this position, with all the victory saved in Eastern Congo today, I'm afraid we can go back very next week, as we just said, that the information was passed on the other side, and the M23 coming back again and regain the ground because of the lack of security clearance process in Congo. We need to work it out. So I'm planning again to run for 2016 election. Yes, I'm planning to run again for 2016 election because we lost 8 million people in Congo. We kept on dying every single day. The man who's talking to you today, he was 7-year-old when I survived the first rebellion war in Congo. He's just taking away my life. I come to the United States to put a new product in the automotive industry, but the Congo issue just shifts my interest on Congo. And I keep on striving to raise that voice, and I thank you for the job that you're doing there.
Thank you for your comments, and I wish you well. I'm not familiar with the particular issue you raised about security clearance issues, but I will pay attention to it. I will say this, that this is a critical moment for the Democratic Republic of the Congo, partly because of success. They have now had a very successful few days militarily. And this is military that has been mocked in the past for being ineffective. So the question here becomes, how does one handle that success? What I would hope is that the world acknowledges that they've made some improvements and they need to make more, but this is not a time for over-aggressiveness. This is a time for restraint and to use the moment to build on the progress that's obviously been made by the military in order to improve it and make it credible to the people of Congo. To take this moment as a sign that Congo doesn't need to solve these problems would be a terrible mistake, because these problems are huge and need to be addressed, but we are all eager to pull together to make that happen.
I have a few remarks. I've been reading some of your statements, and the last one that has been published last week, you were actually suggesting that Congolese government should sit down with the rebellion, the M23, to find out a solution, while you were not suggesting Rwanda, which is being caught by the UN report, such as the one who's backing the M23, because in here, the M23 is Rwanda people, is Rwanda army. There is no rebellion to Congo. That's the fact. We have to have Mr. Kagame sitting down with his fellow citizens.
It's relatively credible. 2011 was generally regarded. If I said that, I misspoke, because I know very well that the international community did not feel that the 2011 presidential election was credible. Notice what the broader mediated dialogue is. It's Rwanda at the table. It's Congo at the table. So let me be clear. I did not say that it was imperative for the Congolese government to negotiate with M23. They were already doing it when I took the job.
So what do you think about it?
But let me just say, so I give them credit for being willing to negotiate with a rebel group, but I don't think that's generally the way to handle it. I don't think asking Rwanda to directly negotiate with the FDLR is the answer. The answer is that these countries sit at the table and deal with these armed groups together. Here's the problem. If you get this message, how do I start a political party and get some political jobs? I know, I'll start an armed rebellion. And then I'll have a peace agreement. And I'll get all these jobs and I'll be all set. You know, we have enough political problems in our country. We don't want to encourage that format for political advancement. So I think the sovereign nations need to be at the table and push on these groups. So I think I'm being even-handed in terms of not saying that Congo should negotiate with the M23. I'm pleased they are, and I think it's going to work to a positive end. But as a general rule, that's not going to work very well, because you're going to have every time one of these groups pops up, you're going to have a country that's trying to actually enforce its laws, negotiating at the table. It was quite a sight to see. There I was in Kampala, sitting in a room, Foreign Minister of Congo, head of the intelligence in Congo, myself, Mark Kobler, the facilitator, and the two leaders of the rebel movement. Now, generally, countries don't like to give that kind of credibility to an armed group that's trying to undo them. So I accept it for this context, but I think for the broader context, we should have internationally supported process with the countries involved.
Thank you.
You bet.
The FDLR flee from the genocide to go to the Congo. Not only those people flee to the Congo, but the UN asked Mobutu at that time to open the border to receive all those people. Since 1997, with Kabila's father came to power, he was backed up by Rwanda. And Rwanda have been still in the Congo since then. The mission that they came to the Congo, so-called, to try to kill all those genociders that flee from Rwanda. And Rwanda army is still in the Congo state now. It's really a big concern. The UN expert report stated that
I cited that specifically, yeah.
It's armed, it's trained, it's doing everything in the Congo. As a Congolese American, I'm saying down here, see what our government is doing. You're just saying, okay, it's not almost 1 million people dead in the genocide of Rwanda. But now, we're going over 6 million people dead in Congo. Why those 900 people should be more human beings than the 6 million people that died?
So this is one of the reasons that I decided to take on this position. I remember that working on Darfur a few years ago, I was one of the senators that took the lead on this, and we had a new senator come in, and I was able to recruit him, and it kind of helped. His name was Barack Obama. We had bipartisan support. But I started saying to people, as horrible as what has happened in Darfur, do you have any idea the level of death and destruction that's going on in Eastern Congo? Part of the problem is a lot of us in this country don't even know what these countries are. So the first step is to help all of us understand what the Great Lakes are. You understand that when I got this job, some people asked me if I was going to be checking water levels in Lake Michigan. That's the Great Lakes. And my favorite place in the world is Lake Superior, but these are magnificent lakes, but including me, coming in the United States Senate at age 39, supposedly pretty well educated, I didn't know anything about any Great Lakes in Africa. So until we know where a place is, we can't comprehend a tragedy in such a place. And so that's part of our job, and you're doing a good job here today of highlighting that the level of death and destruction in this place is one of the largest tragedies ever. It's not an exaggeration. Ever. Anyway. Thanks.
Hi, Senator. Thank you very much for coming here. My name is Anais Kanimba. I'm a sophomore, I'm a junior in the college studying biology and global health. My first question is about the refugees in Eastern Congo, the Rwandan refugees, and the genocide that you've talked about. Have you had a chance to talk to President Kabila and President Kagame about the situation and how we're going to bring them back to Rwanda and the truth and reconciliation issue in Rwanda?
Well, this is of great interest, of course, to Rwanda, who has a number of refugees that they would like to be able to have go back to their homes, but it's also of great interest to the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as Uganda. Recently, when a group called the ADF, which is another very serious...
I'm sure this is not being seriously discussed in your negotiations, but one of the ideas pushed by some of the rebel groups and Wilson policymakers would be the separation of the Kivu region into its own separate state. Do you think, if properly established, which I know is completely a different question, would this be a viable alternative, having a smaller, focused region without the history of corruption and ineptitude that has caused some of the rebellions, or having another poor, fragile state with the same resource, same ethnic conflicts, just open another can of worms?
Great question. Answer, absolutely not. This is the great fear of the Congolese people. They fear that when people start talking about Eastern Congo as a separate problem, a lot of people are saying, maybe it should be a different country.
I have two questions. Last year, the United Kingdom reconsidered its help to Rwanda after the United Nations report stated that the Rwanda defense minister was supporting the M23 in the DRC. So I would like to know what is the U.S. going to do in regard to Rwanda's support of the M23, and in regard to the framework of hope. It has been also alleged by a report by Human Rights Watch that Rwanda is harboring a war criminal, including Laurent Kunda. So what are you going to do to pressure Rwanda and make sure that they are, I guess, committed to the development of the region?
Well, this is one of the most important aspects of this problem. And frankly, it relates to the relationship between the United States and Rwanda. Let me be clear that my goal in this process is not to change the fact that we consider Rwanda a friend and a success story. But that doesn't mean we don't say what we think. And you must have realized and noticed that in the last few months, the United States has taken the lead, which is difficult given our relationship with the country. Difficult because of what Rwanda's been through. But we have been direct in saying, both in Kigali and throughout the world, that we are concerned about the reports, credible body of reporting, including, as you said, by the Human Rights Watch and also by the interim report of the group of experts of the United Nations, that there has been support for Rwanda for M23. I've said this personally. President Kagame, he of course disagrees with me, but we have been consistent in saying that. And recently we took it up a notch pursuant to legislation. Now I'm on the other side of that. I was a co-sponsor of that bill, and I see the timing of things doesn't know exactly when senators make bills. The timing isn't always perfect. But the fact is that, and this was a tough moment for us and for Rwanda, 10 countries were listed as having been involved in supporting or recruiting child soldiers. And Rwanda was one of those countries, and it was not given a waiver. It was one of 3 countries that did not get a waiver because of our concern. Not that the Rwandan military itself does this, but that there was involvement in recruiting child soldiers. Now, this was a very difficult message. But our goal is that Rwanda not support any armed groups, that none of the countries in the region support armed groups, and that we not have to say that anymore. Because much of what Rwanda has done is very positive, and we expect a long-term good relationship with the country, but this problem has to be resolved.
For several reasons, but first I was really pleased because the whole issue of legitimacy when you are having these kinds of talks matters, and getting all of the people at the table, both the Western community, the P5, as well as all the representatives in the region, is really important. I remember that when, under, well, I think it was 97, when they were doing the big table talks just before the African Union was rolling out, they did a lot of good by bringing all the finance ministers and foreign ministers together in Europe for the big table talks. Legitimacy, AU, there at the table. Do you expect that these are going to have that kind of legitimacy by having both the UN representation, P5, as well as each one of all of the regional players at the table?
This is the critical thing, Professor, and the most important thing to say is this is only relevant if the African nations want to do this. This isn't an idea from the UN or the United States. If this is not the way that these countries and these interests want to resolve the problem, forget it. Now, having said that, I began the conversation about this with Paul Kagame. I asked him what he thought, and he told me how he thought maybe it would work. Then I went to Mr. Kabila. Then I went to Burundi, Mr. Nkurunziza. But then, most importantly, I went to Addis Ababa and met with Mrs. Zuma, the head of the AU. And I said to her, is this the sort of thing that it's valuable for somebody to try to put together? I think the sentiment is that the AU would be centrally involved, that the regional powers, organizations such as the ICGLR in the Great Lakes region and SADC in southern Africa would perhaps be involved. But not that the UN would sit at the table, not that the special envoys would sit at the table, but it would be under the auspices of not only the EU, but with the support, technical, financial, and otherwise, of the United Nations and others. And
so a hybrid kind of.
Sort of a hybrid, yeah. But with hopefully the special envoys and others playing an observer and role, whatever role they would want us to play at help. But it has to be Africa-driven, or it simply will not have credibility. But yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. Again, there are different visions of how this will work. There has not been a formal call for this to happen. I am trying to do what Mrs. Zuma told me to do, which is to put out feelers. And that's what I'm doing today. But I did talk to the presidents there first, before I talked to you.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you so much for coming. I'm Sarah Welch. I'm a second-year master's student in the School of Foreign Service. And my question is, what role, if any, has the conflict minerals provision in the Dodd-Frank legislation had an impact on this process? And since implementation is still rolling out, do you have any recommendations for how it can be most effective and helpful?
Again, one of those bills that I was proud to co-sponsor, and I'm the only guy that co-sponsored that amendment and voted against Dodd-Frank because I didn't think it was strong enough, which I got in a lot of trouble with. So it's odd for me to have it called Dodd-Frank, but it has been effective to a point. It has instituted a new regime that it's just started. It's been under legal attack. It's largely survived attacks and regulations. There are corporate interests that don't like this at all. But fundamentally, the legitimization of the mineral trade in that region is fundamental to the future of the region and to not allow exploitation to continue. But we can't do it. There are even people in the U.S. government who think it's not the right way to go. My impression after 3 months is that it is, that there's going to have to be a lot of effort to demonstrate that people will do better under a legal regime than this kind of illegal regime. But I do think that it's the right step, and there may need to be other legislation to improve it or strengthen it. Good news on this is that we have strong support in the Congress for continuing this. People like Senator Durbin, Congressman McDermott, and others whom I've met with, old colleagues of mine, have a real interest in this. But clearly, if we don't solve this, you can get rid of the armed groups temporarily, you can solve some of the political problems, but if it is still an exploited illegal environment, there will not be peace, because this is how a lot of these militias and others fund themselves. It's by making sure somebody can't take the mineral out of the area unless they pay up, for example. So this is part of the dynamic that we have to undo.
And I was wondering, I know you talked a lot, or I find it really interesting, you said that the new approach the U.S. is taking is focusing on the people. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on what initiatives you were taking to engage with the local people. I know you said you talked a lot about talking with African leaders and so
That's right.
on. But if you could talk more about, for instance, you talked about the rebel groups and how, you want to eliminate one of them, but there's so many more. How are you planning to tackle the root of the problem? How these groups are formed? They recruit a lot of children, maybe through education or something like that.
But you're absolutely right, and I did not mention that. It's one of the most important things. Involving civil society in the actual discussions, to have credible representatives of the different interests, to have perhaps polling, where you actually take polls to get people's views. But we also have to get some of the delicate issues that have plagued the region, such as sexual violence. My daughter, Dr. Ellen Feingold, and I, in 2007, traveled to Eastern Congo. It was my first time there. And I'll never forget that one of the things, I gave a little speech at a refugee camp, and they said, would you come over and meet with some women? And, I came in the room and I saw the fear on the faces of the women. What reassured them is, I said, this is my daughter. They realized we were there to talk, but then we heard about the monstrous things that have been done and continue to be done. Mrs. Robinson has provided tremendous leadership as a special envoy in talking about the gender issues and the civil society issues, and that this needs to be part of it. So when you look at these benchmarks of the issue that we're talking about in terms of the future of the negotiation and so on, these goals have to involve this. Now, how do you do it? Well, you have to come at best practices. World Bank, I said to them, look, I was at a refugee camp recently near Goma, and I was told that when women are sexually attacked, it's often when they feel like they have to go out and get wood for fuel, that they leave the refugee camp, and that's when they're attacked. So it's not like they're always vulnerable in every setting, but if they're put in a situation because of food insecurity, where they have to go there, so there are ways there are different studies and different techniques about how you get at it, so we want to figure out the best techniques to solve those problems and the best programs. Some are already being attempted, but much more can be done. But you are absolutely correct. Without the buy-in and involvement of people in civil society, it's to just have the leaders do it is not sufficient.
Okoningana soit au Tabaza, Luanda, South Africa, Abidjan, Yaoundé, Libreville, Paris ou même Jamena. Si koyo kanati keli iyo papa.
Oninga nanga yo, tika kosalanga bongo.